You ever have one of those moments where you've worked really hard on something, but you still end up making these, I don't know, costly mistakes? Well, today we're going to talk about a really cool mental model that completely flips problem solving on its head. The whole idea is to help you avoid errors before they even happen, and it's called inversion thinking. Oh, we've all been there, right? You're trying to follow a set of instructions. Maybe it's for some new software, or you're assembling that piece of furniture that shall not be named, and it's just not working. And that feeling of frustration, it's more than just an annoyance. It's actually a sign of a fundamental breakdown in communication. And see, that breakdown, it has a real cost. The thing is, when we focus only on trying to get things right, we can sometimes be completely blind to the really obvious traps that are just waiting to make us get things wrong. And this is what you get. This is the end result when the research is shoddy or the writing is just plain unclear. You get confused users, you get wasted time, and you get some really deep frustration. And that's the exact outcome we're all trying to avoid, right? Doesn't matter if you're writing a huge technical manual or just trying to explain an idea to a coworker. So, how do we even get here? Well, the source material actually points to a few really common pitfalls in the research phase. For one, you might just misunderstand the product from the get-go. Or maybe you're using data that's totally out of date. And then there are the big ones, and these are huge, relying too heavily on just one source, or even worse, just assuming something is true without ever checking it. Each one of these, as you can see, is like taking another step right toward that cliff of confusion. Okay, so how do we sidestep all those landmines? This is where we get to the good stuff. We're going to introduce a really brilliant mental tool. It's called inversion thinking, and it is all about flipping your perspective completely. You know, for almost any task we take on, our brain's default setting is to ask this one question: how can I succeed? Right? We want to know how to do a good job, how to get the best possible outcome. It's super positive, it's forward-looking, and honestly, it's how pretty much all of us are taught to think from day one. But what if that's the wrong question to start with? What if focusing only on success actually makes us blind to the most obvious ways we could fail? What if there's a much more powerful place to begin? And this slide right here, this is the whole idea in a nutshell. Instead of asking, how can I succeed? Inversion thinking forces you to flip it and ask the complete opposite. What would cause this to fail? By figuring out what would absolutely guarantee failure, you start to see all the broken bridges and traps. You're basically creating a roadmap of what not to do. So let's be really clear about this. Inversion thinking isn't about being negative or pessimistic. Not at all. It's about being brilliantly strategic. You're essentially reverse engineering the problem. You're trying to find all those hidden risks and blind spots before they have a chance to trip you up. Okay, so the theory sounds great, right? But how do we actually put this into practice? Well, it all comes down to asking a totally different and frankly, a much smarter set of questions. So for example, instead of just asking, how can I make this accurate? You flip it. You ask, what would make this misleading? And that question, it forces you to think about totally different things. Like, did I make any unchecked assumptions? Or am I using an old version of the product? You start spotting all these potential ways misinformation could creep in. Or how about this one? What would cause the user to be confused? This question is so powerful because it forces you to put yourself directly in their shoes. You start thinking, what would make them just stop in their tracks? Is it unclear jargon? A confusing layout? By answering that, you start building for clarity right from the beginning. And you can even turn this on yourself, on your own process. Ask, what would cause me to miss important updates? Suddenly you're thinking about your workflow. Are you subscribed to the right communication channels? Are you checking in with the team often enough? It's all about making sure your own knowledge doesn't become the weak link. All right, let's get tactical now. We can take all these great questions and actually turn them into a practical workflow. It's basically a simple 3-step checklist you can use for your very next project. So this is like a whole life cycle approach. First, before you even start your research, you just list out all the potential ways this thing could fail. Then, during the research, you're not just passively collecting facts, you're actively hunting for things that contradict each other, things that don't add up. And then after you've got everything, you do one last super important check. And this after step is absolutely critical. Think of it as your final line of defense against mistakes. You look at everything you've done and you ask yourself, okay, what might be missing here? What's the one sentence that someone could totally misunderstand? And maybe the toughest question of all, what assumptions did I make without even realizing I was making them? When you start actually using this checklist, something really powerful starts to happen. You stop being in that reactive mode, constantly fixing mistakes after the fact. Instead, you shift into a proactive mode where you're preventing them from ever happening in the first place. And as a result, your work just becomes way more focused, more intentional. You're not just gathering information anymore. You're actively building like a fortress against confusion. And that proactive mindset, it just makes every single bit of effort you put in so much more efficient and effective. And this is the payoff. It's pretty amazing, actually. When you systematically avoid all the ways to fail, success almost starts to happen by default. The result is just less confusion for your audience, a lot less frustrating rework for you and your team, and at the end of the day, much happier users. There's this quote from the source material that just sums it all up perfectly. Train yourself not just to gather useful information, but to avoid the traps that lead to confusion, rework, and user frustration. That's really it. Ultimately, inversion thinking is about developing the wisdom to see those traps before you fall into them. It's a skill that just makes you a smarter, more reliable thinker, period. So here's the final thought I want to leave you with. This isn't just for work stuff or writing documents. Think about any big goal in your life, in your career, a personal project, even a difficult conversation you need to have. Where could you stop asking, how do I win this? And instead start asking, what would absolutely guarantee that I lose? And then just don't do that.